I love this guy so much. Mr. Mike Kaplan, what is up, my friend? So glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a great pleasure and wonderful. Like, I feel like I don't even need to say anything. You said it all.
I like to get the resume up front. I mean, because it's not the typical resume that you would find on the exam room. Typically, it's like, they've graduated from here. They practice medicine here. They're a lifestyle medicine physician. They're changing lives. That's great. But I've never once introduced anybody who has their own special called small, short, and handsome. 3 words, which, by the way, describe me to it.
Yeah, I make art not just for me, but for anyone else who likes to see themselves in it. So you're the target market, and I very much appreciate it.
Man, I'm glad that you're here. When I think of comedy, and comedians and stand-up, I absolutely love. I don't know of any others who are outwardly plant-based. Do you kind of have that space corner?
I appreciate it. I've been a comedian for about 20 years, and I've been a vegan for about 20 years. And so over the time I've met, I don't know if I've met now, I'm glad that there are like so many plant-based comedians out there. I was once in a Veg News or some vegetarian magazine feature along with other I don't know if it was all vegan or some vegetarian comedians and comedy related people. One in there that I'll name is my best friend Zach Sherwin, who is a fantastic comedian, rapper, and entrepreneur of a project called The Crossword Show, which is fantastic. It's one of those most beautiful pieces of performance, comedy, music, crossword-related art that I've ever seen. And so if it's near you, go see it. Zach Sherwin is one, and he definitely talks about his veganism in his work as well. Then there is Weird Al. Weird Al, surprisingly, I think he was in that spread as well, and fantastic. I don't have to tell you about who Weird Al is, but what a kind human to other humans and to animals and all the sentient beings that exist. But yeah, there's not a ton of us. I think comparatively, and I'm grateful that the way that I live my life is as statistically rare as it is, so that there exists a market to be cornered. Or what? I don't know. Actually, I don't know if there is one, but I'm working on it. It's me in the corner.
Oh man. So why did you decide to start incorporating some of your feelings about veganism, activism, and animals and all that stuff kind of into your sets? For a lot of people, that's like a touchy topic, right? So, and you're putting it all out there in your sets, man. So what was your thought process when you first decided to, I guess, have your vegan coming out party on stage?
Thank you for asking. I mean, I think I'll have a very long answer, but it'll start with me saying the short answer is that I talk about the things that I experience. And that's, I think, what most comedians are doing in some form or another, talking about, whether if they're political, and they're talking about the ways they see the world, society, and justice and such through their own lens and filter, or, an observational comedian, like just noting the small things about, whether it be, food, dating, other such things. Like, so many comedians talk about food, so I think it would be strange for me to be a vegan as a human being, and I feel like it would be like a glaring omission to be like, well, what is this guy, like all these other comedians, like you watch Jim Gaffigan, like he talks about food all the time. Like, Mike, as a comedian, why aren't you talking about the food that you eat? But sincerely also, of course, like, it's funny the way that you say, like, is it possibly a touchy topic? And for me, like, so many of the ways that I live my life and the things that I just talk about on stage are things that not everyone, in a mainstream way, engages with. Like, I put out an album called No Kidding about how I don't want children. I'm not the only person to not want children, but, I'd say, by and large, like, we come from a long line of people who have had children. So that's out there a good amount. I've talked about when I was atheist identified that, when I'm like psychedelic identified that, when I was open relationship identified that. So I've talked about a lot of things, and I think veganism was one of the first things that I found like, oh, I know that most of my audience at standard comedy venues are not going to be vegan, are not going to be vegetarian, are not going to be plant-based in specific ways. There's going to be regular meat and potatoes people, and I'm like, well, look, potatoes, that's vegan, you're halfway there. Just focus on those potatoes to start with.
Potatoes.
But so I found that creating comedy from this place of like, forging my act in the fires of people who didn't necessarily agree with everything or perhaps anything that I was going to say was like very strengthening, very like helpful to be like, well, if people are going to laugh at things that they don't agree with, then the jokes have to be like more airtight, funnier, like more sort of like undeniable. And so I found that that's like it was, it wasn't like a tactic. It was just like, well, this is what I'm experiencing, so this is what I'm writing jokes about, and now I have to make them good enough for people to be able to, appreciate them and connect with them, which is what I think a lot of comedians do. Like, I think, Carlin has a quote, it's like something like, it's the comedian's job to find out determine where the line is, purposefully cross it, and then bring the audience along with him or her or them to enjoy it. Bring them along laughing at things that are over this line that he purposely determined that is crossed.
I'm a big fan of crossing lines. I don't often get an opportunity to do it on this show, but pushing boundaries is a lot of fun. I think that there might be a good opportunity for you to do that. Think of the fact that there are so many vegan stereotypes out there. I saw one set when I was getting ready to interview you where you were talking about one of the knocks on veganism is, like, you're weak. And you point to yourself, it's like, yeah, basically here I am. There are so many stereotypes out there. Do you find that when you just approach those head on, it does kind of erode any of that touchiness that's also in the audience for people who are like, I'm going to eat my steak and I'm going to eat it with breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Yeah, I mean, I think the very first vegan joke or vegetarian joke that I made, and like the way that I would get into it in my earliest sets, I would say, hi, I'm vegan, are there any other douchebags here? And I felt that would be, a fun disarming way to immediately like address these stereotypes that I think a lot of people have about vegans. Or like on my newest album, AKA, I get into it by saying, like, I'm not here to tell you that I'm living my life better than you, I'm merely here to imply it. And then further, like saying, I was, before I was vegan, like before I was vegetarian, like I was, I wasn't those things for 18, 19 years of my life. And so I get it, I remember, I understand, like, the fear, like, well, is there going to be food for me? Am I going to be able to, like, everyone, sentient beings just want to live, and we need food to do that. And when you're raised in a certain environment, like I was raised sort of a typical American meat food, like just like burgers and hot dogs and pizza and that sort of thing, and classic American pizza. And I didn't have, and I remember feeling that there was this gap between like how I wanted to live, how I thought was the ideal, and what seemed possible, like when I was a teenager. I was like, not in control of necessarily like what food was even in the house. I didn't have a ton of money myself, because to hold into your parents, your family, wherever you're living. And I was like, well, it'd be great to not hurt animals. It'd be great to not kill animals. I don't know, like that doesn't seem possible. And so I think that a lot of people have that. I feel like so many people have the idea. They're like, of course, if I could, yeah, but it's, I just have this inertia, this is the way that I do, this is the way I have done things, this is the way that I will do things, and like, but so many people out there are like, they know that the movies exist, they know the documentaries, they know the books, they know the information, and they're like actively avoiding it because if they were to address it, they'd be like, oh yeah, I can't watch how animals are treated, otherwise I couldn't keep participating in it, and I like participating, so I feel like I remember feeling that way. It's not like I'm not special compared to anyone. Like in Buddhism, which I've been learning a lot about recently, I really like that they say, like, what one tool can do, any tool can do. It's not like the Dalai, my friend Gus, who is a Buddhist and who I learned a lot from, he told me the story about the Dalai Lama, and that's, they're like, okay, well, of course, the Dalai Lama can be kind and compassionate, but he's the Dalai Lama, and that's like, that makes this comparison to like, well, that's like saying like, wow, what if you build a house out with your own tools, with your own hands, with bricks and wood, and you made a house, and then be like, wow, what an amazing house that just fell out of the sky right here. Like, no, I did that. That's the thing that it took time and effort and energy and thoughtfulness and, acting on these intentions, and that's the way that the Dalai Lama is capable of the kind of acting that he exhibits, is by intending it and acting it and actively participating in it, and that anyone can do that. I think he has a quote that Dalai Lama says, like, be kind whenever possible, it is always possible. And so we can always, be a little kinder or better or something than we were yesterday. If we know a little more today, then we can do a little more. And so, to get back to, I think, what your question was, like, my goal in, discussing things that right now, like, I like to think of, I never thought about it like this before, and I'm looking for my digital recorder to record this to do as a possible joke, but the idea is, most of my audiences are not full of vegans, but I like to think that they're full of future vegans, like, because I'm a vegan who at one point was a future vegan, was a non-vegan at the time, and so my goal is to, not to decent, like, not apologize for, like, who I am and what I'm doing, other than maybe jokingly be like, we're sure annoying, aren't we? Okay, but seriously, it's horrible, right? We all care, about, I mean, so many people, unless you're a sociopath, like, love other beings, including, like, cute animals. People love looking at cows, they love looking at chickens, like we're all these living things, and so I think there is something to tap into, that it isn't just, I feel like I'm pushing people, hopefully, if I'm pushing people, it's not, like, into somewhere that they're if it's uncomfortable, it's only because it's something that it's like the uncanny valley of what the conflict of what they really do truly believe and in their best heart selves, like, would live, and what they're doing right now, which is not yet having gotten there, but I'm optimistic.
Well, you're a soulful guy, man. You can tell, like, you have a math background. I mean, like, what you just said is extremely intelligent, in my opinion. I love the way this conversation is going. How important do you think it is for you as a performer to push someone into that space where they are a little bit uncomfortable? Does that really help you, I guess, have a more robust kind of a show? Because if you're sitting there and everybody's comfortable and ha ha ha, this is a joke that really, it's funny, but it doesn't make me feel any kind of way, I don't think that that's really going to connect is if you, like, really kind of push them over into a space that they're kind of unfamiliar with, you know what I mean?
I do, and so I guess it's an interesting framing, because I don't usually think about it in terms of making the audience uncomfortable, because, like, I mean, that's not my goal. My goal is not for the audience to be uncomfortable. My goal is for the audience to laugh, and sometimes, and my goal in general is actually, I think about it not in terms of what the audience is doing, but in terms of what am I doing. My goal is to communicate what I think is funny, meaningful, personal, unique about me, about my perspective. Like, I'm here as another Carlin quote I love is he says, you're here for me, I'm here for me, no one's here for you. And I like that, even though that's not, there's part of it that resonates as joke, but also like when I'm writing, when I'm coming up with what I'm gonna say on stage, I do not censor myself. I'm like, what do I want to say? And then I come up with thousands of things, and then I determine what are the ones that I do want to say, what are the ones that I want to hone and craft into jokes, into chunks, into an act, into a show. And obviously, performing as a comedian, as a musician, you can just write a whole album in your basement. Nobody hears it except for you, and then you release it, and there it is. With comedy, that's much rarer, much more common to, like the audience is in a way partially the instrument that we're playing. We're like, oh, how do these notes strike you? Oh, we got to tune that one up a little bit. That one, okay, great. This audience, this one's a little further in tune or attuned than this other one. And so I think that let's see, I have a specific thing that I want to get to, and maybe I'll start there and try to backtrack and get us there. But so a thing that happens sometimes, I feel, is I say things that are true to me, that are meaningful to me. Let's say if about veganism, if about like the reasons for my veganism, I think that these are things that objectively people can understand. And so and then if they're hearing them, like a joke is a wonderful delivery system for the truth, especially for a truth that people might not have come to on their own without this joke, and maybe wouldn't have been open to if it was just delivered in like a sermon or a speech, than, in humor. And so I feel like a way that things go sometimes is like I'll tell jokes about my experience of being vegan, and then that will somehow maybe possibly undo some of the stereotypes that people have about vegans, that like if I do it in a way that is not overbearing, if I do it in a way that does not seem, like annoying or arrogant or whatever the stereotype that people have, like wonderful compliments that I've gotten about the comedy that I've done about being vegan from sometimes people who become vegan or become vegetarian in part because some of the things that I've said have resonated with them in a way that they're like mathematically what you're saying seems valid, and so I have no choice but to become vegan because your comedy proved it to me. Like, that's not a direct quote, but like there are experiences that are kind of like that. So I feel like it's not a goal, but sometimes like a beautiful, like a joyful outcome of my comedy is people are like, I laugh and like somehow it's like a Trojan horse, like that the truth has gotten snuck into them, and they're like, what you're saying I didn't agree with, and yet it seems I didn't agree with this undeniable thing that you have shared. And so even if they don't immediately become vegan magically on the spot, I feel like a good thing, the disarming nature of comedy has the capacity to make someone, to help someone hear something and listen to something that they might otherwise not have done. And so to get back to the root of the question, the discomfort that a person might feel in that situation is perhaps the discomfort of growth, the growing pains of going from being like, well, I thought this way, and now I have this new information, this new data that I must reckon with, because, and I think that again, it goes all the way back to, like, people are generally, in Buddhism, one of the ways, the framings of it that I really like is that the goals of a lot of Buddhists, if not all Buddhists, are to increase happiness and decrease suffering for all sentient beings. And that, it can often start with ourselves and our families and for a lot of people, our species. But it's starting from a place, putting your own oxygen mask on first, and then being like, okay, now it seems like every being deserves oxygen and food and care and the capacity to live their life the best that they can. I think that truly deep down, everyone agrees with that, or would agree with that in some framing. To be like, all other things being equal, like, do you think if you could live your life causing less pain and more pleasure, would that be good? I think so many people would agree that it would. Like, it seems like very basic and, like not super controversial. And then the discomfort that a person might feel hearing jokes about veganism and about my perspective on it might be like sort of the discrepancy, the cognitive dissonance between that immense truth that they know, within their deepest self, and the way that they're living externally, that there's a conflict there. And so, like, I don't think I'm providing discomfort. I think the discomfort's coming from inside the house. We're all experiencing our own engagement with this world. And I think I might have finished answering the question. I guess here's another joke I tell sometimes about. Here's the best argument, I'll say. I think the most, like, this is really like the realist argument that I've ever heard against being vegan, against caring for animals, against living a plant-based life for these reasons. Like, here's the best argument I've ever heard against it. I don't wanna. Why do I have to? And like, because I truly think that that's really the root of it. That people don't. They in a way, they know they should, but they don't want to, and so therein lies the discomfort. And I hope that my jokes are funny, as objectively as possible to as many people as possible, and if they also do help a person who regularly eats meat think about whether they might want to do that less, that is a bonus.
I find irony in it that as you're performing, you're planting these little seeds of contemplation at a venue where very likely, if it's like an improv or something like that, people are, chowing down on cheese sticks or burgers or chicken wings or whatever the case may be. So they're, really as they're eating, you're delivering this message. I would think then that that's really going to cause them to actually think right then and there, like as the set is going on. Have you ever given thought to that?
That is a great question. I'm certainly thinking about it now, and maybe I will, introduce that into the act when, because certainly, you're absolutely right. When I'm performing at your sort of conventional comedy clubs, they often have, these days I'm so glad that there is usually more and more likely a vegan option or possibilities of vegetables on the menu. So I feel like, society is changing at, a glacial rate, but still, glaciers, eventually will disappear because of climate change. And so eventually we'll be in a completely new world where we'll just be eating humans, other humans, because we've caused all the other animals to be extinct. But there's a comedian who died a few years back named Barry Crimmins, who I love, who had a joke about becoming vegetarian where he said, I think I became vegetarian one day when I was holding a chicken wing, or a drumstick. I was holding a drumstick, and I noticed that it was, a bone with meat on it. And he's like, and I was holding it in my hand, which I also noticed was a bone with meat on it. And, like, just that, I love that way of putting it. So I wonder if I appreciate, I didn't know you didn't set this out to be, like, a challenge, but I'm absolutely going to think about when I'm performing in places now, like the classic, I feel like this is a showbiz classic as well, that, I'll be here all week, try the veal. I'll be like, I'll be here, all night, try not the veal, try not the chicken wings, try not the burger, order just the lettuce and tomato, just order the pickles, whatever you've got on this menu, I'll be here all week, try the pickles.
There it is. I'll be here all week. Try the pickles. I'll give DC Improv. I pulled up their menu as you were talking there, and right up front, they do list the vegan options. So they've got hummus with vegetables, cool. Chipotle chickpea burger, and then they can do salads. Just hold the chicken, and then hold the chicken and cheese, and then they're vegan. So not bad. But then if you look at the remainder of the menu, and it is, exactly what it is we were talking about: mozzarella sticks, chicken tenders, crab dip, crab cake sandwich, barbecue bacon cheeseburger, all kinds of burgers, BLTs, etc., etc., etc. I think that a joke like that could hit. I really do. I think that there's potential there just because it's in their hand as you're talking. Yeah. So it just kind of almost becomes like a prop for you, the fact that they've got this burger in their hands at the time.
Speaking of foods and improvs, I mean, do you have a go-to meal before you perform? Are you superstitious, or are there certain restaurants that you hit in every city before you go in? How does that work for you?
Great question. Thank you. So I would say that if it's a binary yes or no, I'm not superstitious. I'm just regular stitious, just like Clark Kent stitious, and trying to keep the audience in stitious. And I would say it depends on, like, if a club, like, let's say, recently, the person who connected us is the owner of Green Fair, the vegan restaurant in Herndon, Virginia, Gwen. And I love performing there. I love performing in a vegan venue. I love performing for, a more majority vegan, vegetarian, plant-based audience. So I'll usually check out the menu of the venue that I'm performing if it's not specifically a vegan place. And if they have food that I can eat, then I'm thrilled to eat that either before my set or after, depending, or in between shows.
Woo!
I was on the road recently in Colorado in a few different towns. And I remember, I'll usually, the joke that I tell sometimes when people say, so you travel the country, and you must be finding all different kinds of vegan spots. Like, have you ever thought about creating like a vegan travel guide, like writing a vegan travel book? And I say yes, and I think I'm going to call the book Google Vegan Town Name. And essentially, that is what I do. Or now I use the Happy Cow app sometimes as well, which is a fantastic way. So, like, if I'm in a town it depends how long I'm there. If I'm in a town for a week, I'll usually, like, scope out, like, the used bookstores, the comic book stores, the botanical gardens, the public parks, and the vegan restaurants. And, I'll look at what the best ones are. And it depends. Often my girlfriend is traveling with me, so I guess here's an answer to your question. When we're on the road, like, since the pandemic began, I've driven a lot more than flown places. I've taken a few flights, but a lot of times we've driven to Kansas City, where her mom lives. We've driven to Chicago and Minneapolis. We've driven to Florida from New York. And so on our trips, one of our mainstays is searching for Whole Foods along the way. And because Whole Foods almost always has, some food that we can eat. And specifically, there's not all Whole Foods. I don't like hashtag not all Whole Foods, but many Whole Foods have this brand. What is it? I don't like to say brand because branding comes from the marking cattle with a very harsh, burning sensation. So, like, when people ask, like, Mike, what's your brand? I'm like, it's more my brand, My brand is oat, I guess, and my flavor, I like to say as well, my style, my vibe, but they have so there's this company that makes food that's in many Whole Foods called Urban Remedy, or Urban Remedies, I think, and they have they have like a bunch of raw stuff. They have a bunch of this lovely vegan Caesar salad that we get a lot. So that's one, when we can find that, we often get that because we know we love it. So Whole Foods are a place that I hit a lot. But then, just if I go to a town and it has a vegan restaurant, if it has many vegan restaurants, I try to support as many of them as I can. So, like, I think there's a place, I love the name, I think it's in Raleigh or the Raleigh area, the Fiction Kitchen, I love. What a fun, like, just sonorous set of sounds there. But yeah, like, there's we were just in Portland, Oregon, and there's a place called Fermenter, and it's just like, classic vegan place with an emphasis on fermented things. Like, I feel like it's wonderful that there's so many towns that I've traveled to that have, I think, restaurants too numerous to even think about or name all of them. I'll name one more. When I did comedy in Boston for many years, that's where I started. And my favorite place to go to, my go-to up there is Grasshopper, an Asian vegan place. And also throw in Teaneck, New Jersey. My mom lives in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey, and I love Veggie Heaven. So just, I would, before a show, so I don't have specific routines or rituals before a show other than to show up to the venue before the show or before my spot. But then also just, like, search for the best vegan food around, and sometimes plug in those familiar places that I know about into the old GPS or look them up in the Happy Cow app.
I mean, I stopped listening when you said there was a place called the Fermenter. Is the Ferment? That sounds like a bad pro wrestling gimmick, but an amazing name for a restaurant. That's awesome, man.
Oh yeah, I think Portland is one of my. It might be my favorite city that I've never lived in. I went there. I've probably been there, certainly some double-digit number of times in the past decade. Like an average of probably more than once a year, because there's a wonderful comedy club there that I just performed at called Helium. They used to do, there was for 10 years or so, there was the Bridgetown Comedy Festival, and I just loved it. And I think one of the things I love about the town is that I believe that in order to stay open at night, bars have to have food until, some food until 2 in the morning. And I think it at least seems like there's some regulation that there need to be vegan options, or at least there's just so many venues that have, there's vegan food till 2 in the morning, so many places. I bet there's more late night vegan food in Portland, per capita, proportionally, than even New York, perhaps. I don't know. I would say shots fired, but, I'm a pacifist. So, vegan shots delivered down the face. I don't know, I also drink alcohol these days. But, I love Portland. What a town for veganism. There's a vegan strip club there, that's the thing. But they also have the most strip clubs and bookstores per capita. It's a fascinating town that I love very much.
Shout out to Portland. All right. All right, let's talk about your broccoli and ice cream podcast. That is one of the more clever and unique names I've heard for a show. What does broccoli and ice cream mean? Because I know that there is a deep meaning behind it.
I appreciate it. So first, I'll say that as a vegan person, as a plant-based eater, there are sometimes people that are like, hey, what do you mean ice cream? Isn't ice cream not vegan? I'm like, well, first of all, it's metaphorical. No ice creams were harmed in the making of my podcast. Also, of course, the word cream itself, let's take it back. Let's reclaim it to the not just non-vegan lifestyle. There's cashew cream, there's coconut cream, there's, almond-based, obviously, almond-based ice creams. And, to call those things, some people are like, can you call them that? And I do love, I don't know if you followed the Just Mayo lawsuit where people were like, hey, you can't call it mayo because its mayo has egg in it, and Just Mayo is vegan and doesn't have egg, and the Just Mayo people were like, oh, our just means, justice. We're the mayo of justice. We're not merely mayo. We're justice-based mayo. And they won. So, but also, I think that the fact that people are fine with, when people are like, you can't call it almond milk, where are you milking the almonds? You gotta call it almond juice or something. But people are fine with coconut milk. Somehow that is, grandparented in, even though sometimes it's grandfather is grandfathered in. But I'm trying to start grandparented in. And people are like, if you're fine with coconut milk, then why not almond milk? Why not, words mean what people agree that they mean. There is no inherent meaning to these sounds. So, this is all to say, first of all, that is to defend the vegan bona fides of calling a show broccoli and ice cream. Second, I'll say that the name, I'll credit the aforementioned vegan friend, Zach Sherwin, my dear friend who I talk to, if not every day, near every day, for I believe it was in conversation with him that we were discussing the concept from which sprung the idea for the podcast and the name for the podcast, which is that essentially I talk to people, I have 2 conversations with a guest each week or so, each week-ish, and one of the conversations I talk to them about the broccoli, the work of their life, and then I talk to them about, in the other conversation, the ice cream, the joy of their life. So often I'm talking to comedians, but sometimes activists, sometimes authors, sometimes musicians, other artists, just friends. I think people who do some kind of work in their life as represented by broccoli. And of course, sometimes the work is joyful and sometimes broccoli is delicious. I feel like sometimes people hear the name and they're like, oh, things you don't like and things you like. Or